Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Sustainability Partnerships webinar for today. I'm going to give it a couple of minutes as usual to let everyone just come in. We do have quite a few sign-ups, so we'd like to make sure that everyone has entered the webinar before we kick off in earnest. So I'll just wait until we've got, we do have quite a few people have already started to join in now. We've got the chat function as usual. If everyone wants to say hello, if you've got any comments, if you want to just let us know who you are and where you're coming from today, please add in that chat function there. Can one of my team please add a hello so that I know that that's working, because sometimes Zoom doesn't let people say things in that chat. So I'll just make sure that that's fine. So we're a couple of minutes past, so I'm just going to start. Yeah, thanks, John and Evie, for putting that in there to make sure that that works. Thank you. We're going to make a start. So welcome to the Future Proof Your Bid and Achieve Net Zero, a guide to PPN 0621 webinar. So this is a bit different for sustainability partnerships. Most of our webinars are there to service the needs and the interests of those within the NHS who have an interest in sustainability, sustainable procurement, etc. And we generally bring in businesses who have interesting alternatives to products and processes within the NHS to showcase what's out there in terms of sustainable alternatives. Today, the webinar is catering to the businesses that actually are on the procurement framework for the NHS. And the differences today is going to be that we're going to have some speakers who will give some insight to you and how you can actually start engaging with the NHS, as opposed to the other way around is how we normally do that. So we have some really, really good speakers today, and hope that we'll find really interesting, helpful and valuable to your business. We're actually going to start off with Daphne. So Daphne is the Net Zero Sustainability Senior Manager at NHS England. Daphne has kindly offered to bring her view to this conversation, set the scene for us initially, because we wanted to make sure that we had the voice of someone from NHS procurement there to give us some insight from that side. We're then going to move on to John Rastrick, who's from Flotilla, and he's also brought in James Rycroft from Reader Health, and those guys are going to give us some inspiration on how you can create your carbon reduction plan. And finally, we're going to finish off with Jessica, who's going to give us some insight and inspiration on how to make the most of that carbon reduction plan from a communications point of view. If you want to add any questions, we're actually going to go through each of the presentations concurrently and then have the Q&A at the end. Please use the Q&A function on Zoom to add your questions, not the chat, because sometimes if there's lots of chat, I can lose the questions in there, and I'd rather them have them all in one place, and we'll pose those to our panelists at the end. We're going to start off with Daphne. So Daphne, if you can please share your screen, introduce yourself, and let us know what you're going to go through with us today.
Perfect. Thanks, Georgia. I'll just share now, and if you can let me know that that is working.
Yeah, that's shared. We can just still see the full screen though, not the presentation mode. So it's up to you if you want to just go through it this way.
Is that working better or no difference?
No, still not the presentation mode, but that's absolutely fine. We can see what's on them.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why it's not coming through.
It's okay.
I'll make it bigger like this, and then hopefully
Yeah.
that helps. So yeah, thanks, Georgia. Nice to be here. So my name's Daphne Delena. Like Georgia said, I work at NHS England in the Net Zero and Sustainable Procurement team, and I'm just here to basically give you a bit of a background into the Net Zero Supplier Roadmap and the April 23-24 milestones, which require carbon reduction plans and net zero commitments, and then an introduction into what those actually are before passing on to John and James. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context in terms of where the Net Zero and Sustainable Procurement team at NHS England sits. We do actually sit in the NHS Commercial Directorate as part of the kind of sustainability and innovation work stream, but we are also very much part of the Greener NHS programme. So we're the kind of supply chain arm of the Greener NHS programme, but sitting in the Commercial Directorate, which is obviously really great for us, because that means we kind of engage across sustainability professionals, procurement professionals, and we can really bring out our policies and kind of support our wider colleagues to implement these successfully, basically. I'm sure you're familiar kind of with the other work streams, and I won't go into too much depth in those, but yeah, just wanted to bring to life, where we actually sit within NHS England, and kind of how we then can make sure that our policies are implemented. The key thing I want to get across in the kind of next few minutes is what carbon reduction plans mean, how they sit within our program, and why it's really important to us. So as you can kind of see on the slide, and I think most of you will probably be quite familiar with this, but back in October 2020, the NHS published the net zero report that outlined the key targets and ambitions of the NHS to achieve net zero. They're highlighted on the page. So, achieving net zero by 2040 for the emissions that we control directly, often, referred to as the NHS carbon footprint, and then net zero by 2045 for all our emissions, including those that are embedded in our supply chain, also quite commonly referred to as the NHS carbon footprint plus. And what you can then see on the right side of the graphic, of the picture, of the slide even, down here you can see highlighted in red the contributions basically of our supply chain into our carbon footprint plus. As you can see, the two bars are really big, so from non-pharmaceutical suppliers and pharmaceutical suppliers. And what this really means is that we can't achieve net zero without working with our suppliers. So, we need to engage with you in our supply chain to be able to achieve our net zero targets. We need to work collaboratively with you, and we need to bring you on the journey. So what will come to life in the next few slides is, we're not trying to hinder any suppliers on their journey. What we're actually trying to make sure we do is bring you on the journey with us, engage with you, so that actually, come future milestones, come future asks, you are just as prepared as you need to be to meet those. So the next slide, again, I think you'll all be quite familiar with the NHS Net Zero Supplier Roadmap, slightly changed graphic, as you might tell from a kind of few months ago. But this basically sets out the milestones that we need our suppliers to meet in the next few years by 2030. So we're obviously now on April 23, 24. Again, from April 2022, we have adopted the social value model, requiring a minimum of 10% net zero and social value weighting in all our procurements. That's obviously been going on for a while. From April 2023, we adopted PPN 0621, which requires all new contracts above 5 million per annum to publish a carbon reduction plan for those scope 1, 2, and a subset of scope 3. And then from April 2024, so from 10 days ago, that's gone live, we've proportionately extended this to cover all new procurements. So again, I'll cover exactly what this looks like in a bit. But as you can see, I won't dive in too deep into the April 27 or 28 milestones, but the milestones continue, and all of that is to bring our suppliers on the journey. So our ask for April 23-24 is that first step to then prepare our suppliers for the April 27 milestone. April 28 requires product level carbon footprinting. There's a lot of ongoing work on what this actually means, so I won't be able to answer quite a few questions that sometimes come in about this, but please rest assured on this, there is a lot of work going on to understand what this will actually look like, and plenty of notice will be given to suppliers in terms of how to actually meet that milestone. So if we go into carbon reduction plan and net zero commitments, so what we tried to bring to life with this graphic is how our different program areas work together to ultimately help us achieve our aim that by 2045, the NHS will be net zero fair and have a transparent supply chain free of modern slavery. What we're obviously focusing on today is carbon reduction plans and net zero commitments. And you can see that really relates to suppliers' corporate level performance. What I mentioned earlier in terms of the April 2022 milestone around net zero and social value, of course, again, I think you're all familiar with this. Those are contract level commitments. And then we can touch base on some of the other two. But what we want to bring to life in terms of the carbon reduction plans, the purpose of these is to raise the baseline sustainability performance of the NHS's 80,000 suppliers. We're bringing that level up for our suppliers so that actually we're all starting from the same place. When we talk about the evergreen assessment, which we won't focus on today, but that is the space for suppliers to show how they are going beyond that minimum. But the carbon reduction plans, it's there as that minimum first step, bringing our suppliers on the journey, helping them to understand what carbon accounting is, why they need to be setting a net zero commitment, and the importance of it. So what is it? We have a few slides on this, but it's a two-tiered approach that requires that corporate level commitment to net zero by 2050. And then for kind of full carbon reduction plan requirements, that also includes sharing of emissions. It's for suppliers bidding for contracts in the NHS above PCR thresholds or tendering for in-scope frameworks. So just to be clear, when we talk about the extension of the carbon reduction plan requirements being proportionately extended, this relates to NHS contracts specifically. So not kind of wider public sector at this stage. And then we've got a wealth of support available when it comes to carbon reduction plans and net zero commitment requirements as well. So, we've been holding bi-weekly webinars on CRPs. We've got a CRP checking service. So I think you're going to get a few tips on creating CRPs. Once you've done that, you can send it into our free CRP checking service where we'll double check that you meet the key requirements of a carbon reduction plan, and you'll get the feedback on how to make improvements if you need to, or whether you've met those requirements. We've obviously got the guidance, and we kind of continue to work with suppliers to understand what additional resources they need to meet these requirements. So when we talk about carbon reduction plans in terms of one policy, two tiers, like I said, this is really there to ensure our suppliers are advancing along the roadmap and are supporting our suppliers to take those early steps to prepare for those future roadmap milestones like 2027. It really is one policy, two tiers. So there are full carbon reduction plan requirements that was started in April 2023, aligning to PPN 0621. So like I mentioned already, that's for those new high value contracts, 5 million per annum and above. And then for all new frameworks that are run for NHS organisations. And then when we talk about a net zero commitment, it's key kind of selected key requirements of a full CRP. So the next slide will show you that real kind of how it is a subset and it is a two-tiered policy. And that's for all new lower value contracts below 5 million per annum and above 10K. So again, that's come into force from 1st of April. So this is only for, just to highlight, for new procurements from this 1st of April. So just to highlight what this tiered approach looks like, so you can really see, carbon reduction plans. Again, you'll be hopefully quite familiar with the requirements of them, aligning with PPN 0621. So that's confirming the bidding supplier's commitment to achieve net zero by 2050, outlining baseline year emissions and reporting year emissions. Setting out some of those projects that you're undertaking or going to undertake, being board approved, being publicly available, and be updated regularly, as well as being put in the kind of template that's available. Again, I think you'll be provided with a bit of guidance, but when we talk about the template, you don't have to, you can have stylistic changes, but the key thing on the carbon reduction plan is, it's not a 60-page ESR report, for example. That is not what it is. And then when we talk about a net zero commitment, like I said, it is really a subset of those CRP requirements. So confirming that commitment to achieve net zero, being board approved and being publicly available to show that commitment to 2050. So these are kind of bringing to life a little bit the policy, why we're doing this, bring our suppliers on the journey, why we need you to come on this journey with us, and why we've got this in place to kind of help you prepare for the next milestones on the supplier roadmap. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Daphne. It's really a really good scene setter for the rest of the discussions. It's nice to see some new graphics. We've been running sustainability partnerships for the last 3 years, and we've been seeing the same old graphics come out. So it's really, really cool to see that some new, refreshed information is out. I think the checking service is going to be really, really interesting to people, so that everyone's aware. We will share all resources that have been talked about today. There was a question there as well about the webinar. We'll have the full write-up, the recording of this webinar, and all slides and contact details available post-event, sort of sometime probably early next week. I think that is really important point about the NHS bringing suppliers along on the journey. Daphne, you and I have talked about this before. It is really important to just genuinely engage and explain why we're doing this. The NHS can't do this alone. No entity as big as the NHS would be able to do, reach the ambitions that we have for 2040 alone. And it really is about educating working and bringing the suppliers along for the journey. So with that, John, I'll pass over to you. You can let us know, businesses now, they know what they need to do in terms of carbon reduction plans. How can Flotilla help out?
Thank you very much, Georgia. And thank you, Daphne. That was really, really insightful. And hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today. My name's John. I'm the founder of Flotilla. Flotilla is a net zero technology platform and advisory services businesses. We work with lots of SMEs, medium-sized businesses, and multinational firms as well in terms of helping businesses outsource effectively their carbon reporting, their net zero plans, and also providing guidance and support with their sector regulatory needs. And we do a lot in the public sector and healthcare and a lot around PPN 0621. So this is really in our sweet spot, and delighted to be here today. My background, I was a lawyer and then in private equity for 20 years and helping put in place operational plans, business plans. And I really wanted to build a business that could do that from a purpose-led perspective. And my view is that this process of reaching net zero is incredibly important. And if we can help businesses embed within their business models purpose, support them on their net zero pathways, and actually make it simple and impactful, particularly for the SME community, it will make a huge difference to the UK and beyond reaching their targets. So today we want to help assess the challenges you're facing with PPN 06, but also identify the solutions and benefits in achieving that. So delighted to be here today. And a big part of what we're going to talk about is a short case study. And I'd like to introduce you to James Rycroft, who's the Managing Director of Vida Healthcare as well.
Thanks, John. I'm delighted to be here. As I say, my name's James Rycroft. My company is Vida Healthcare, and we design, develop, and then operate care homes for people living with dementia. And we have 300 beds, 180,000 square foot of new build. And my journey in terms of sustainability has been slightly blurred over the years of the development. And we were told that we had to meet very good in terms of BREEAM, and therefore that's my sustainability box ticked. Until very recent years, we've come out of COVID, and now it's become highlighted to us that the importance. I've always known the importance of it, of course. I don't mean to sound so naive, but the importance of it is now is certainly on the agenda of social care, and I think social care have been slightly behind the curve. So I'm delighted to be here to talk about my journey.
Thanks, James. And we just thought we'd start with a recap on PPN 0621, but this has now been covered very comprehensively by Daphne. So thank you, Daphne, for doing so. But this is just a one-slide summary of that tiering, that banding now of requirements to make a commitment and evidence a net zero pathway and show that you're moving in the right directions. The theme for us as a business in supporting our clients with this is recognizing that there are lots of reasons why you should do this. Of course, the obvious one being around supporting society, supporting our planet, supporting our people with this journey. But for businesses, you can look at this in many ways. You can look at this as a regulatory requirement. You can look at it as a cultural and purpose-led position. You can look at it as an advantageous proposition for you to lead within your sector. And I just thought it'd be really useful to talk about where the pain points are, quite frankly, in terms of the legislative requirements, but also how those pain points can be turned into opportunities for businesses as well. And I think it'd be great, James, just to touch upon your thoughts around this, whether, from your perspective, I know there's CQC requirements, there's other requirements as well. What led you into the discussion, this area of debate? And then, what benefits have you seen in terms of doing this?
So I think, from a social care perspective, I received a report from the bank relatively recently, and it was all about ESG. That was the only thing. It wasn't about selling any services from the bank, and found that really interesting, and it really picked my ears up, because I think social care has been behind the curve a wee bit, and that's what this report stated, along with some other really interesting facts. And I think social care is rightly so, if I dare defend it in that way, because we've been through the pandemic and been slightly distracted. However, coming out of that and being introduced to yourselves regarding this platform, and it also just been on the agenda of everything now, the importance of it to me, in terms of all of what's up on this slide now, it's an eye-opener. And I've really enjoyed the process, and think culturally in our business, the impact of it is enormous. And that's the biggest shock to me. It's the staff and their engagement and their judgment of an operation. And rightly so. They really do take it to heart. And I'm very pleased that that's the case, because it's really pushing us forward. So this process with Flotilla, from our point of view, has opened a few doors and opened my mind a wee bit.
There's an interesting statistic around that. I think 47% of 18 to 34-year-olds would seek to work elsewhere if their employer was not committed to sustainable cause. And I think, that as a standalone statistic is quite staggering. And actually, in the context of being an approved supplier, meeting your accounting standards, and meeting your regulatory standards, this is becoming a cognition precedent of doing business in our view. And it's not quite there in terms of all sectors, and it's certainly coming down the pipe. And so, there's a real opportunity to lead if you go early in terms of leaning in on carbon reporting and net zero planning and broader ESG requirements as well. And it's quite an exciting opportunity. We're fortunate to work with hundreds of clients now, and they start with often the need, and then move to the opportunity, and then move to the advantages of communicating that externally to their broader stakeholders as well. So really, really interesting area. And I'll just give you some examples. We work with a life science business, and it generated $500,000 of cost saving by putting in place a net zero plan. That's 30% of their energy bills reduced per year in their first year of taking action. So some of these benefits are very, very tangible and very, very real. So I hope that rings true. I mean, a lot of people, I'm sure, on this webinar will relate to one or two of the boxes, but they may see the visibility on all the areas that can enhance your business is really, really valuable. Before I come on to the case study, I was just going to come up with a couple of more statistics as well. So, in terms of purpose and culture, obviously within the healthcare sector, all CEOs, all directors, all employees understand the value of purpose. But just across the whole economy, 69% of UK CEOs now say that organisations are defining what they do by purpose. And I think that is very, very interesting. But the challenge, I was going to ask you about this, James, is that 9 in 10 small businesses believe this is critically important to do, but 42% say they struggle to get guidance. And this is why the great work that the NHS is doing in terms of providing support and to their supply chain, and what others are doing. It's really important to knock over some of these barriers to entry. So I just wondered whether you wanted, before we come to the case study, just touch upon that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that. From my point of view, because it does ring true. For us, we talk about ESG and carbon footprint and all of these things, which is a relatively new language to me. And as a CEO, and it's interesting that of course, if you're not involved with this, you're missing a trick, and you can't afford to do that. I think with social care, it's now regulated. It's now part of the regulatory setup. So the CQC have brought in, the Care Quality Commission, that is, who regulators have brought in a new single assessment framework, and they specifically highlight the need to show a responsible approach to ethical and sustainability operation. It's fundamental, and we will now be regulated on that, and rightly so. But it just shows a real step forward. This has only come in this year, the social care. I think for me, though, when I started to hear all of this language coming through and the necessity of it once we'd shaken our feathers after COVID, it's quite scary, because you immediately think, as an operator, this is going to cost me loads of money. Let's put loads of photovoltaics on the roof, and that's how you become sustainable. And actually, this process of working with you guys has put it into perspective for us. And for us, it's small steps. And actually, it's about, as we should be all doing as CEOs and business owners, it's all about efficiency, saving money, and being sustainable. All of those things come together as one. So it's a win-win situation. It's just, I guess, educating people and giving people that guidance and knowledge to move forward with confidence. I think one of the things that this case study will say for us is that, the CQC always say, we can see that you are doing this, but actually on a regulatory level, if it ain't written down, it doesn't exist. And I think for us to actually, I know that we can sit here and say, right, well, we've gone paperless, we've turn the lights out, and I'm simplifying it, but we turn the lights out when we leave the office. We turn the air conditioning off. We make sure that our waste is taken away in the right way. All of these things are really, really important. But how do you actually evidence them? And I think doing this study over the last sort of 3 or 4 months with you guys has really put that into an evidence-based document with a strategy coming out of it that has measurable outcomes. Now, for me, that's gold dust because it's not a language that I spoke before, but now basically I take all the glory for it.
It's really, and you know, you wouldn't say this, but under the CQC approval process, you know, every one of James's care homes at Vida Healthcare are rated outstanding. And now that ESG forms part of that assessment, it's a critical part of you evidencing not just the quality of specialist dementia care that you provide, but also that you're doing it in the right way for the benefit of the planet and society as well. So I think, you know, I know you wouldn't say that, but I think, you know, it gives you that advantage to your residents, to the services, to the partners you support, that actually you're doing it to a very high quality level and you're leading within your sector. So I think that's a really, really important point. And the second piece here is, yeah, we've moved from box ticking to that point of data and evidence. And so a lot of people are taking really good actions, taking really good steps towards net zero, but there's no capability of, you know, evidence into the NHS, evidence into their supplier, to their employees, to their funders, to whoever it may be, that they are progressing towards net zero. And that's why I think technology is a really important tool, because it drives efficiency, it's simple to adopt, it's cost effective, and you can measure the outcomes of what happens. So yeah, I think some really critical points there. Yeah, just coming to the case study then. Let me just bring this on. Here we are. So yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you just want to touch upon the complexity of your business, and I can touch upon, you know, actually how we support it. So, in short, everybody's in the foothills, aren't they, of undertaking carbon reporting and net zero plans, and therefore having the benefit of carbon accountants, consultants to guide you, and also systems that can drive simplicity and ease of adoption. And that's what we sought to do, to be with you every step of the way and then outsource it. And so, you know, for Vida, you know, what was really important was they were leading in terms of their net zero trajectory. So they've gone for 2045, not 2050. To Daphne's point, you know, it's really important that they're not looking at just scopes 1 and 2, but they're also looking at scope 3. Scope 3 can represent 90% of your footprint and also part of the biggest opportunities. And then, you know, it's critical to you that you engage with your employees and surveyed them, and then could evidence what you've done. So I don't know whether you wanted to touch any of those themes, James.
I think one of the, you know, the most important things, you know, was the engagement of the employees, and that previous stat that you put out, which was the 45% of 18 to 35-year-olds.
Yeah.
It's astonishing that, and it's true, and it's valid, and it came out with the surveys that we did in-house, and the results and the feedback from our staff were, again, astonishing and shows their commitment to it. One of the biggest things in social care, which is appalling, really, is the turnover of staff. Now, I'm really proud that actually at Vida Healthcare, our turnover of staff is under 5%. So we're doing really, really well. But the national average is 30 to 35% turnover of staff, which is just appalling, because great care is about consistency of staff, of people understanding your residents and getting to know them. So, you know, it's a really big issue. Now, if ESG, or, you know, carbon, all of this has got something to do with retention and can help, then that in itself is absolute gold dust for our sector on its own. But I think all of it, you know, all of these, again, I go back to it, the simplicity of what we received at the end of this, and the fact that it spelt everything out really, really easily for us, and therefore is totally shareable with not with our suppliers, with our funders, with our banks, with the CQC, and with our staff, and with our residents and our residents' families. You know, there's a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders involved in all of this, into the thousands, I would say. So for us, it's a document that is spelling things out and helping us all join together to try and beat this. Ethically first, actually. Ethically is the first thing, actually, and then the monetary and the financial savings and efficiencies come second.
I think that's really important, and I know that Holton are going to come on to talk about this with Jess in terms of just, you know, there's a lot of this which is around governance, is about making informed decisions, about getting board approval, but then there's a point about do we have the confidence around what we're going to do to communicate that externally? And I think that's one major theme. And you know, everyone talks about greenwashing and green hushing. We don't want to be going through this program of developing these plans if we can't allow ourselves to talk confidently and openly about the actions we are taking, and also what we're not doing quite yet, but we're going to do in the future. So doing that in a data-led way is really, really important. The second theme is, if we have to do this, we know it's the right thing to do, but if we have to do this, we want to be able to design bespoke plans that are commercially viable, that you can embed within your business models, and they work for you as a business, as well as just having to do this from a perspective of the planet or from a perspective of a supply base. So it's really important that they're bespoke plans that relate to your sector, your business particularly. And then finally, I think it's also really, really important that this is done in a phased basis, and you work on a long-term strategy. Because, you know, the supply chain is the area where the complexity is. And, you know, most of the supply chain are SMEs. 90% of corporates in the UK are SMEs. Unless we have solutions that work for your supply chain, then we're not going to have solutions that are going to result in the UK reaching their targets. So these are really, really important themes that, you know, finding the right partner, whether it's Flotilla or anyone else, you know, there are people out there that can really help you drive these outcomes and take the opportunities to evidence you're doing the right thing to your stakeholders and you're doing it in the right way. This is just an example of the VIDA report. Just very briefly, this the sort of, you know, filling out the NHS, the government-led PPN06 form is great, but do you have something? How do you turn that into something that's really high quality that you can use? Well, this is very easy to do using our systems and software. So, you know, just looking at the outputs that you can get, you know, how these can be. You can work with these with great organizations like Holston in terms of communicating these sorts of this data to your audience is really, really important. And then, you know, just some recaps really about developing and communicating your plan, which Jess is going to go into a lot more detail, but primarily, you know, has to be data-led, has to be credible, has to be evidence-based. You know, be honest and transparent. You know, I think it's really important to say what you are doing, what are you going to do in the future, and what you are not doing, and using data to support and evidence that. I think it's critical. Be specific. Everyone's doing some incredible initiatives. We're seeing some amazing things happening with it around the UK and elsewhere. Set those examples out. You know, a lot of our clients are aligning their reports with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You know, really impactful, purpose-led, cultural-led goals that you can align your business around, and then bring everybody with you, bring your employees with you, ensure you're communicating this and celebrating your successes, and ensure that you're finding someone that is with you for the journey and can make it as simple as possible and as commercially viable as possible. So, yeah, I think that really covers what we wanted to touch upon today. And look, if anyone's like most of our clients in the foothills of this, or they've started it, but they haven't really quantified the impact of what they're doing, we wanted to also, you know, set out, because we're keen to have a material impact in terms of the UK meeting its goals. You know, feel free to get in contact. And for those that have attended today, we will offer a discount as well for having to listen to James and myself. Sorry, James. James is going to be upset with me about this. So that's all I wanted to say. And James, thank you so much for joining us today, and very happy to hand over to Jess. Sorry, back to you, Georgia, actually, in terms of next steps.
Yeah, thanks so much to John and James. I really appreciate you guys coming on and giving us, you know, a holistic view of what can be done with your carbon reduction report, not just a, hey, this is what we do and this is what you need to get done to get past the tick box exercise, the holistic, meaningful piece around it. I appreciate your candor as well, James, that it's relatively new language to you, and I think that that's a really important point to make, that actually this isn't necessarily something that people already know 100% around, and it's about being open and honest about the things that you do and you don't know, and also that it's not all just about putting some solar PV on your roof. There's a lot of efficiencies that can be made just looking at what you've already got and the processes that you already go through. I think as well, John, what's really interesting about what you guys do at Flotilla is be that partner for the future as well. It's not just a one and done, here's your carbon reduction plan. It's we are going to be with you for the long term, because, you know, some of the things that Daphne mentioned was, you know, this is what's happening this year, but hey, this is coming up in 2 years, this is coming up 2 years after that. If you're not already got something in place for what's happening now, how are you even going to be ready for what's coming up in the future? So it's really important that I think that you guys offer that ongoing partnership piece and guidance around, you know, the extra value add around just the carbon reduction report. So thanks for sharing that. I think that that you did touch upon some of the bits that Jess is going to mention, particularly around the anxieties of green hushing. So if people don't know what that is, Jess is going to go through that, and as well some more insight into how you can make the most of your carbon reduction plan within your marketing strategy. So I'll pass straight on to you, Jess, if you want to give us an intro to you and what you're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I'll just try and get my screen up. Can everyone see this?
Yep, that's it.
Hi, so I'm Jess, head of digital comms at Halston Group, Halston B2B, if you've seen it both ways on my LinkedIn, but essentially the marketing agency that oversees this. But I'm going to speak today around leveraging your carbon reduction plan. So obviously this is a key element for the latest amendment, but it's kind of how to make the most of the work that you've already done. You've put in all this effort, like make the most of it. So yes, obviously a carbon reduction plan for the PPN 0621 is a regulatory document. I get that, but it doesn't need to feel like one. I think when people see regulatory, they have to think it's like a boring document that nobody wants to ever read again. But this is a really powerful document, and I think it's a mindset of how to use this differently. This is obviously the first legislation, obviously amendment to impact like all the tender sizes, not just those high level ones. So maybe this is quite an early first stage for many businesses when it comes to reporting on carbon metrics or any sustainability. You know, some may not have any sort of idea of their current footprint in terms of carbon and environmental. So this is probably quite an early doors for many people. So it's how to kind of make it the best it could be. Obviously, it requires to be publicly available. And with that, you can showcase it in the same way you see people use sustainability reports, impact reports, ESG. There's so many names these days, but this document could be used in the same way that you do those. So missed opportunities, just little things I've started to notice that people do. So this is the standard government template that's just available online. It's a Word document that you fill in. And people have started to use that as just an attachment on the website, but they also tend to place it kind of in their footer and next to the cookie and privacy policy. And I do think that's just, it's not very accessible on site, and that's not, maybe it's not throwing shade or anything, and it's probably unintentional a little bit, and it's just an easy place to attach a document. But because it's placed in your footer, if you think of how many times you probably go to the footer of a website and look for stuff, it's very rare that you would do that. So it's just not front and center, and it's not being progressed in the same way this document should be. And it's also not something that it's probably maybe seen by a couple of team members who've drafted up the documents and created it, but actually it's maybe not progressed internally as well. So we'll go into a little bit around that obviously this is something that everyone needs to have involvement with and an understanding of company-wide. And also it's probably just used for that one circumstance. So it's, you know, you're applying for a tender, we're having to get this done, getting the document and just attaching to the tender and obviously making it available on your website. But actually you're not thinking of how that could be used elsewhere, how that's to your advantage, how this can be actually really powerful for you as a company. So it's just missed opportunities that I think people can work on when they do these. Topic obviously that John mentioned earlier, so green hushing. There's various definitions to green hushing, but it's when usually a company is fearful, reluctant to share their carbon metrics. And usually is that because they see the data and they're probably a little bit worried, we're creating tons of carbon, and that's, you know, people are going to have something to say about that. But the thing is, everyone will have this, like, there's no way, particularly those supplying into the NHS of large quantities and large tenders, you are going to be creating carbon, and you probably will be. But the main point about this is the reduction yes, it may be high now, but you're making a statement and a commitment to obviously change this. So really, and this amendment is really catalyzing the transparency, because it has to be publicly available, and it's really promoting transparency across the industry. So I don't want people to be worried about, I don't want people to see this, because actually it's not a worry, and you will be making a change. Like, we've got a client, they're an international company, they do glass manufacturing, and glass manufacturing, obviously they are burning furnaces at crazy high temperatures, they are producing a lot of carbon at the minute, but they're very open with their data. They have all their carbon metrics outwardly, things like that, because they're so committed to changing, and they've already begun initiatives that each year they're seeing really incredible reductions in that. So they know it's high, but they're not trying to hide it. They're like, yes, it is, but we're doing something about it. And I think it's just that mindset of, yes, it's here, but we're going to change that. So just a couple of things, just from our perspective, how you could potentially elevate your carbon reduction plan and just make the most of it. Accessibility. So first and foremost, obviously, it should be easily accessible. Businesses, obviously, the legislation was brought about to be pushing sustainability action downstream, allowing the public sector, particularly the NHS, to gain some real transparency over their suppliers. So why place it somewhere that's just not visible? What we'd recommend is maybe placing it on its own website. So this is an example of a sustainability website, is usually a good place to place it if you have one, or you can create a landing page. Placing it in your main navigation, because if you look at the metrics of your website, how often people ever look at the bottom? And you can get heat maps to even see where people go, but main navigation, front and center, sustainability page, and just having it there so it's open, easy to access for anybody in company wide. Also making this accessibility internally. So we've said earlier about, obviously this is great for people to know what you're doing and the actions, but internally, maybe a few people who've been involved with the actual collation of the data, creating the piece, the CEO maybe. There's only a few people that may have been involved with creating it, and if it's just attached somewhere that no one really looks. Also internally, and we all know that sustainable action, quite a huge proportion is that scope 3, and a lot is to do with employees commuting to the office and stuff, is a huge carbon metric that most people are aware of. But if your employees don't know that you have this commitment to change and you're looking to do this, you're implementing these initiatives, you've listed your carbon reduction projects in that plan, but if none of your employees know it's happening, you're not going to see the change that you want to see. So there's also a piece around internal communications. We do things like newsletters, emails out to employees. We also have like awareness days, things like that really drive that collaborative approach, because a carbon reduction plan really does need to involve all of your employees in it. So how to use that document, sharing elements of it, making bigger pieces of it, turning it into a day, really helps to make this more of a holistic approach. I'm going to do a lot more. And as John and James both mentioned, recruitment is massive. This is a huge piece that people need to know that you're actually committed to change, because particularly as the younger generation enters the workforce, they do not want to work for a company who is unsustainable. They really want to see some real transparency. They want to see some honesty from companies in terms of what they're doing. So this can also relate back to who you are as a company, your culture and stuff like that. So intertwining it in that way can also help with your recruitment pipeline, and you can work on that as well. And then
yes, I think, oh yeah, sorry, I thought we could only see that one slide.
Yes, don't worry, there's another slide. So here's just some examples. So Veralia, the glass manufacturer that we spoke about earlier, this is like Veralia Environment Day. So these are some elements actually from their documents, and these were actually screens that across their factories and offices. They have TV screens with information that's just going on company wide. So we implemented some of the environmental stuff actually into their TV screens to let employees know. Also, this is another one. This was as part of documents, some brochures that we'd sent round. So there was a build a bug hotel. It's a bit of a random one, but they wanted to get the kids and the families involved as well. So they did initiatives like that and trying to engage employees eternally. PPG people, what they did is every time they did initiatives that were kind of working towards their goals, they wanted to put it on their internal comms platform. So they did like reducing obviously CO2, they delivering paint by cycle, help support Earth Day. It's things like this that really help to show your employees that you are actually doing what we've said we've done, but also making them aware if they weren't previously. Next up, I've had designs and formats, because strictly speaking, there are no rules to say that obviously the carbon reduction plan needs to be branded. There's nothing to say that, but it shouldn't be a document that you're not proud of. It should, you should be proud of this document. It's a really great thing that you're doing. Yes, you're having to do it because of this regulation, but it shouldn't be a tick box exercise. It should be something that you actually want to pursue and you do want to make that real change. So it should be documents that you are quite proud of. So here's just a snapshot of an example. And you want to make it something that you would send out to, stakeholders, attach on tenders, whatever context you want to use it for. It should be something you're quite proud to kind of get out there. So we have like examples, obviously flotillas comes lovely designed up with amazing infographics and stuff like that, but you can obviously add quotes from the CEO about why you're committed to change. You could add in quotes from employees around why they're excited about what we're doing and how they're involved with it. If you have internal members like a sustainability manager and stuff like that, implement them into the story behind why you're doing it as well. You can also do a lot with the format. So obviously this is just a booklet. You can turn booklets into digital formats online because sometimes it's not the easiest to read just a PDF. So flick through like a magazine. It seems simple, but it does boost the engagement. And you can also use tools that track how many pages people get through. So you can actually like see how much engagement you are getting from those. You can turn it into video. So you could take like one section at a time, one area, for example, and you could turn that into an animation or a video just to say the story of this area. And you can place that website, social, there's so many places you can use it, and there's so many formats. You can obviously alter the carbon reduction plan, break it up into sections and use it to the most, because it took you a lot of time to collate all this document and do all this work. Well, or if you use Flotilla, it took them a lot of time. So make the most of it, and stuff like that, and see what you can make it as engaging for any audience that gets to see it. This is turning the data into evidence. Obviously, you're getting this data to say, obviously, this is what your carbon footprint is. You've proposed your carbon reduction projects, and usually people just list their projects. But I think particularly on the Flotilla solution, it's quite good because you assign projects to people and be like, this is who should do this. This is how you move on. And you can see the progression. And that's a really important part, because the carbon reduction plan should not be a stagnant document to never be looked at again, to never be refreshed. This is something you should be refreshing annually to check where your carbon footprint has got to. Have you met those projects you said you did? You said you were going to. What's your reduction so far? It really should be, to get that real accountability, it really should be refreshed and adapted each year. And obviously that is super important to actually achieving that carbon neutrality, not just saying that you're committed to it, to actually doing it. And marketing is a way to basically put your money where your mouth is, basically. It's really a good way to show evidence that you've done some of the projects that you've said. So for example, this is a press release here for ImageCo. One of their commitment was to implement renewable energy. I know we dissed solar panels earlier, but here's some solar panels. He's placed that was one of their commitments in their projects, and they've done that. So that's sort of, and this press release was talking all about that in industry news. So they placed that, and they also do like a blog or a social post or just updates. You could be doing, for example, a blog halfway through the year to be like, here's the update so far on our projects. This is what we've been doing. Really just letting people know, and you can evidence all of that host it on that landing page of sustainability alongside your carbon reduction plan. Like, here's our plan, but if you want to see what we're up to, you know, follow us on socials, check out this blog, because we're actually doing what we say we're doing as well. And it's a really good way to outwardly evidence to everyone that you are doing what is expected. Also, there's a bit of a side benefit, SEO. So obviously search engine optimization, for anyone who does not know, but basically having an array of marketing materials discussing your sustainable actions and plans, and all increases the opportunity for you to rank higher on Google for those who are looking to procure sustainable business. So this may be, obviously NHS is obviously all tender work, but if you look at it from another perspective of elsewhere, you may work wider than the NHS. If people are looking to just procure for sustainable businesses, you could actually appear in those search terms for sustainable medical equipment, sustainable POS, for example. This is an example for Imagco. You are going to more likely appear for those search terms. So it's actually just a way of also making your business really kind of aligned to sustainable outputs and sustainable business. So these are Google trend graphs, and you can see each one is on a slow sort of rise, and it's things like what is ESG, net zero, sustainability reporting. All of that is on a trajectory, and there's ones that are more specific to obviously industries, dependent on which ones you're on, and everyone can go look at this and see the data. And one other example is like Imagco. When we were trying to work on theirs, they wanted to show that they were only sourcing sustainable products from now on. They wanted to get rid of all the plastic-based products and convert to cardboard. They were doing loads of things, and they were like, we want people to know. So we actually increased their ranking from 81 for sustainable POS, so point of sale for your retail stores, to position 19 in 1 year, and this increases each month as well. And that means for them that when people are looking to procure just sustainable based products, they appear for it, because they're actually putting in that work and telling people what they're doing all the time. So there is a little bit of a side benefit there as well to talking about what you're doing. And obviously every business has a sustainable story to tell, and customers, investors, employees obviously really expect companies to stand for positive change. And you know, there is a bigger growing narrative around this, but you can actually use your carbon reduction plan to build your sustainable story. You can let people know what you're doing about, tell them in all your marketing, and it's just something that, yes, it's one document, but actually there's so much elements to it that can be turned into much bigger pieces. And yes, it's a regulatory document, and yes, you have to do it, but is that the only reason why? Because if that's the only reason why, then yeah, fine, you don't need a story, have your Word document, I don't care. But if you actually want to make real change, and you want to tell people why are you passionate? Like, why do you want to progress this further? Like, what is the reason that your business is doing this? Why are you one of the first ones doing it? What makes you different? Who's driving that change? That is a story that is so much stronger than, yeah, we made this document because you told us to. Like, that why of why you're driving that change and how you're driving that change is such an impactful story that should be something that you really want to let people know about, and shouldn't be just a random little document that you never really use. So that's super important. And just some examples here. This is Raleigh again, but it's like their CSR. So this is from their CSR, actually. I was trying to find examples of social posts, but it's like a swipe through, and these are quotes from their CEO, from the CSR director, our roadmap around why this is important to us, what we're progressing, what we're doing. They do stuff like that all the time to let people know. There's also Imagco's director here, looking for all smiley, with his award win, and this was award win for green commitment and stuff like that. So it's also the fact of being recognized for actually you are being the first to do this, you are progressing this, and you're doing some great work out there. So even like you could even get like award wins and stuff like that to let people know. We have an email here. This was Colliebox, like email letters to like emails to like let people know what you're doing and stuff like that. But also your sustainable objectives, like break those down, super easy, engaging posts of like, this is what we're committed to. And then you could do a separate one on just one of these commitments and how you've started to progress this. So it's basically loads and loads, and I don't want to list all the activities because there's a lot, but there's so much you can actually do with this carbon reduction plan. And just the main thing I think to take away is to really change the mindset of you have to do this, but you should want to do this as well and make the most out of all this effort that you're doing. But if anyone wants to quick chat about how to turn this into maybe a wider sustainability story and getting the comms out there, obviously drop me a message and yeah, we can arrange that. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jez. We do have a few questions. I think that Daphne has been really helpful and gone and answered in quite a lot of detail some of the questions that have been posed to her. I'm not sure if she's still here, so I really appreciate that she's gone. She's actually sent some links. I will make sure that we do get everything, or all of the resources and everything from Daphne that she talked about earlier, and make sure that we get them up on this. Oh, she is still here. She can't see any one of the slides, but she can still hear. That's okay. Well, we appreciate you getting on with those Q&A anyway, Daphne. And we do have a question here from Phil asking the panel's view on the carbon impact of AI methodologies. So do you guys at Flotilla use AI? And I think that the debate is obviously around the carbon intensity of AI practices.
Yeah, thanks very much. And by the way, Jess, I thought that was a really insightful conversation, because just very briefly, it's all well and good doing this work, but unless we lead and set the example within our sectors to our broad audiences that we're doing this, others won't know and others won't follow. So to get momentum, get movement, get people doing look at this, it's very compelling to have both the regulatory need, but also have the impact in showing how it can support businesses being successful. So I thought it was a really insightful presentation. I was just playing for time there around AI. No, I wasn't. So AI, we do use AI actually. We use AI because we crunch the data that is provided by our clients to make prioritized recommendations which are tailored to them. So depending upon their priorities, whether it's cost savings, carbon savings, ease of implementation, short-term goals, long-term goals, we use AI to help develop bespoke plans. We also use AI in terms of AI consultants that work alongside our specialist consultants as well, so that everybody has to hand access to quality data and answers to key questions in order for them to drive their process forward. Furthermore, we use it for coding, we use it for conversion. In fact, we use it in lots of ways. The main benefit right now is efficiency. And so, there's a direct correlation to what's the carbon footprint of somebody doing that manually over a long period of time versus using technology to deliver that. And, we look at that quite carefully. But I think, AI, in terms of particularly communities like the SME market, need the benefit of that sort of technology so they can feel confident that they can simply utilize it and work with it. That said, because, again, we're in the early stages of AI, we always ensure it's reviewed and checked and sense checked by our consultants as well. And it's a really key area. The theme, Phil, okay, sorry, I'm just reading your question. I'm looking at the cost and application. Sorry, let me just have a look at that question.
Yeah, he says he's looking at the cost of applications with the NHS. So I guess, Phil, do you mean the carbon intensity costs that have to be added to scope 3, or do you mean that's what he means? So obviously there's carbon intensity included in
there are conversion factors that we use when we look at use of all IT services. We look at the cost of data centers, the power utilization, the water usage for coolers. So there are conversion factors, but they are not. They are at a level which are not yet defined tightly to be able to answer specific questions relating to either product or service. They're just generic conversion factors utilizing IT. So that's something we could take offline and have a conversation about, Phil, if helpful. but it's, the conversion factors are upgraded every year to order to calculate the implementation of that activity or the spend on that activity, and that's something we can talk about later if helpful.
Yeah, I think it is a much bigger conversation. It's definitely the agility of AI becoming a lot quicker and less carbon intensive. But I think that it's definitely a good question, one that we all need to think about, not just using AI because it's there. It is a carbon intensive way of computing, right? So, well, Phil's put his email there. You can take that. You can take that conversation offline.
That'd be great. Yeah,
you guys. There was an anonymous question asking what extra information and metrics might be helpful to include in your carbon report. So I think that's a good question for Daphne can't really jump in just now unless she wants to type something on the chat. But I think if you want to start us off, John, and James, if there's anything extra that you thought, oh, that was quite nice to, like a nice to have to be added in, and then Jess, if you want to throw in any ideas as well for like supplementary information.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's progression of carbon reporting all the time, and I think what needs to happen is it's done in a phased basis. So initially, people start with their operational footprints, their corporate footprints. They then develop towards their supply chain, and then develop towards understanding the actual carbon footprint of provision of products or services. So there's always bespoke advancements that can be provided, which can be really, really useful because you can drive efficiencies and reductions based upon the data that comes from that. So for me, what's really important, and this is in line with GHG guidelines, get started, calculate your footprint, operational footprint, make sure you can talk credibly about that, and then enhance your data and your coverage based around materiality and based around your specific needs within your business. So there are lots of areas around service products, supply chain questions, moving from spend-based data to activity-based data, and there's a whole program of how you advance that provision. There's another question which is relevant to that as well, which is looking at this from a KPI perspective. So it's very hard for growing businesses to reach net zero from their baseline year. But within the GHG guidelines, you can reduce your footprint by KPIs based on FTE, full-time employee, or by £1 million of turnover as well. And that again is aligned with GHG guidelines. So there's KPI metrics, there's extensions, materiality changes, and just that deeper coverage of your supply chain, your scope 3 is a really, really important area to extend through to.
Yeah, and James, is there anything that you're excited that you saw, oh, I didn't really think that we would have that on there, or I didn't really think that might actually even be something that would contribute to the carbon?
Nothing sort of specifically jumps out to mind at the moment, purely because we're sort of at the early stages. Our report's only just been produced a couple of weeks ago. But one thing that did happen at the kind of when it was revealed, presented to us as a report, was it started a whole new conversation. And what it says to me is that I need to kind of embed this report into our senior staff and management, so that we sort of change there's a cultural shift in how our conversations work, because I found it quite exciting, and there's lots of opportunities out there that come from these conversations based around the report. I didn't know an awful lot of, I didn't realize that, once you've got this report done, then it opens up, green sustainable loans via the bank, for example. It's a whole new world out there of opportunity. So the takeaway from the initial reading of the report is that those exciting conversations which change direction.
That is really exciting. That's a great piece of information there as well. Jess, is there any final, because we're actually over. So if you can just give us any final thoughts on, what other things can be added to the report, or what supplementary sort of narrative you think that works in terms of the communications around CRP.
I mean, I might have touched on this slightly, but I think like the people aspect is quite nice. I feel like getting quotes, CEOs, mission statements, stuff like that is quite nice. And they're elements that would be existing in other documents probably, but maybe placing them into there, because they do intertwine quite nicely. And just kind of, if you have a project, maybe some explanation around who's leading this project, what we're doing in the coming years, like a bit more of a story around each of your projects and stuff might be nice. It all sort of depends on the size of the company and stuff like that. But yeah, I think little elements like that add a bit more of a personal touch.
Okay, well, I appreciate everyone staying for a few minutes over. We are going to have to stop there. And as I've said before, this whole thing has been recorded. We will send out contact details. We will send out the slides and the write-up of this event. I quickly just need to share some of the things that we are doing as a group. First of all, I'm going to share my screen and make sure everyone knows that they are invited to the Green Tech Catalyst Conference, which is happening on the 25th of April in a couple of weeks. We have a morning session for green tech innovators, and we have an afternoon session for industry leaders who are looking to implement green tech within their businesses. It's in Leeds, it's in person. We have all of these exhibitors, speakers. We have Flotilla there again. If anyone wants to come and speak to John in person, he will be happy to take questions at that event as well. I'm just saying that you will, John. I'm sure that you're happy to have people approach you in person as well. So we'll finish off with that. And then we also have with sustainability partnerships, as usual, we have loads of great events coming up. We have our Sustainability Day of Action, which is our flagship event, which is 4 webinars in one day. So that's going to be on the 20th of June. We do also have Earth Day coming up, which is on the 22nd of April. So that's in a couple of weeks, next Monday. And that's NHS Plastic versus Pollution. And on Wednesday, the 22nd of May, we have Driving Sustainability Innovations in NHS Transport and Travel. So if you're interested in any of those things, please view the NHS Sustainability Partnerships website. All of those events are now available for sign up, always for free, always online. Otherwise, we look forward to hopefully seeing some of you guys here in Leeds. Thank you so much to everyone who has signed up to come today. Thank you to Daphne, who has now had to leave, but we will make sure you've got all of your questions answered from her as well. Thank you so much to John and to James for your contribution to today's event, and to Jess for finishing that off with the communications piece as well. We hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and look forward to seeing everyone at the next Sustainability Partnerships webinar.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting, Georgia. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.